April 30th, 1945. Dawn. The sky over Berlin wasn't supposed to look like this. Bruised purple bleeding into ash gray, smoke rising in thick columns that twisted like dying prayers. I sat inside our T-34, shoulder pressed against cold steel, and watched the city reveal itself through the vision slit. Somewhere beneath that haze of burning stone and shattered glass was the Reichstag. Somewhere in that graveyard of an empire was the end of everything. My hands trembled as I loaded another shell into the breech. Not from cold, though the morning air bit through my uniform, but from knowing that today we would drive a knife into the heart of the monster. Knowing that some of us wouldn't see tomorrow. Knowing that even if I survived, something inside me had already died somewhere between Stalingrad and here. Dmitri. I looked up. Sasha sat across from me, chewing a piece of stale bread that looked like it had been baked before the war started. His face was streaked with oil and soot, eyes red-rimmed from smoke and sleepless nights. But he was smiling. That damn fool was always smiling. "You look like you're about to piss yourself," he said. "I'm thinking." "Don't. Thinking gets you killed." He tore off another piece of bread with his teeth. "Besides, what's there to think about? We're almost done. Few more hours, we plant the flag, and Hitler's nightmare ends." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But all I could see through that slit was fire. Buildings leaning like broken teeth. Shadows moving through the rubble. Civilians, soldiers, ghosts. I couldn't tell anymore. Berlin wasn't a city. It was a carcass that hadn't stopped twitching yet. The radio hissed to life, crackling with static and distant explosions. Captain Leonov's voice cut through, sharp and clear. "All units, this is command. Advance to Reichstag sector. Repeat, advance to Reichstag sector. Glory awaits? Glory." I'd stopped believing in glory somewhere around Kursk when I watched my best friend burn alive in a tank just like this one. Glory was a word officers used to make dying sound noble. Yuri, our driver, wiped condensation from his goggles and glanced back at me. "You ready for this?" "No." "Good," he said, hand already on the gear shift. "Means you're still human." The engine roared. The metal beast beneath us shuddered and lurched forward, treads grinding over broken cobblestone and twisted metal. Through the vision slit, I watched the cityscape crawl closer. Skeletal buildings reaching toward a sky choked with smoke. Streets bleeding rubble like open wounds. A tram lay on its side ahead, windows shattered, red paint scorched black. We rolled over it. The screech of metal on metal set my teeth on edge, and for a moment I thought I heard screaming beneath the treads. But it was just wind whistling through broken steel. Civilians scattered as we approached. An old woman clutching a bundle of rags. A man limping with one leg, face gray as the ash falling around him. A child, couldn't have been more than 6, standing in a doorway, watching our column pass with eyes too old for that small face. I looked away. "Keep your head in the fight." Leonov's voice crackled from the commander's position above me. "Enemy positions 200 meters. Panzerfausts confirmed." My chest tightened. Panzerfausts. Handheld tank killers. Some desperate German soldier waiting in the rubble, ready to turn us into a funeral pyre with one good shot. I adjusted my grip on the loading lever, sweat slicking my palms despite the cold. The shell in the breech suddenly felt too heavy, too real. One pull of the firing cord and that explosive would tear through steel and flesh and bone. Another soul erased. Another name that nobody would remember. In my pocket, I carried a photograph. My wife, Katya. My daughter, Anya, taken 3 years ago before I left for the front, before the world caught fire. Katya's smile was frozen in that moment, real, warm, alive. Anya was barely 2, sitting on her mother's lap, reaching for the camera with chubby fingers. I fought for them. Every shell I loaded, every street we took, every German position we overran. It was all for them, so they could wake up in a world where Hitler's shadow didn't blot out the sun. So Anya could grow up without fear, without war, without the sound of artillery in her nightmares. But I wondered sometimes, in the dark spaces between battles, if they'd recognize the man who came home, if there was anything left of the Dmitri who kissed them goodbye in 1942. The tank jolted over debris. Somewhere close, artillery thundered. Ours or theirs, I couldn't tell. The sound rolled through the streets like God clearing his throat before pronouncing judgment. 200 meters to objective, Yuri called out. Sasha stopped chewing. His smile faded. I pressed my eye to the vision slit again. Through the smoke and morning haze, I could just make out the silhouette, massive, dark, crowned with a dome that looked like a broken skull. The Reichstag. The heart of the beast. My mouth went dry. This was it. Everything we'd fought for, bled for, died for. It all ended there. In that building. Under that flag we'd carried across half of Europe. The radio burst to life again, louder this time, urgent. All units, advance, now, advance now. The engine screamed. The world lurched forward. And somewhere in the ruins ahead, Berlin woke up to meet us with fire. The calm shattered. Artillery thundered somewhere ahead, not the distant rumble we'd grown numb to, but close. Close enough to feel in my chest, in my teeth, in the steel walls pressing against my shoulders. The first shell hit 2 streets over. I didn't see the explosion, but I heard it. That deep, earth-splitting crack, followed by the rain of debris clattering on rooftops like hail made of stone and death. The radio screamed, "Enemy armor retreating, eastern sector. Push forward, push." Leonov's voice cut through our headsets. "Gunner, load high explosive." My hands moved before my brain caught up. Grab the shell, swing it to the breech, ram it home. The metallic clang echoed in the cramped space. The smell of gun oil and sweat and fear filled my lungs. Loaded. Driver, forward, follow the lead tank. The engine roared. We lurched over something, twisted metal, bodies I didn't want to know. The treads ground and screeched. Through the vision slit, I watched the world tilt and blur, gray buildings leaning at impossible angles, streets choked with rubble, smoke pouring from windows like the city itself was bleeding. A piano played somewhere, one broken note over and over. Then silence as another shell hit and the building collapsed into itself. We rolled past a burning truck, flames licking up its sides, black smoke pouring skyward. Inside the cab, I glimpsed a shadow that might have been a person once. I looked away. You learn to look away. Contact front. My heart stopped. Through the smoke, it emerged like a nightmare given form. A Tiger tank, massive and angular, its long gun barrel swinging toward us with terrible, deliberate slowness. The painted cross on its turret was scorched and faded, but still visible, still defiant. "Reverse! Reverse!" Leonov shouted. Yuri threw the gears. The engine screamed in protest. We lurched backward, treads spinning on loose stone. Too late. The Tiger fired. The world became light and sound and violence. The shell hit the cobblestones 3 meters in front of us. The shockwave lifted our tank's nose like a toy, slamming me against the turret wall. My vision went white. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. I tasted blood, bit my tongue. Fire! Fire! Someone was screaming. Maybe me. Maybe Leonov. Our gun roared, once, twice, the recoil slamming through the chassis, through my bones, through everything. Smoke filled the compartment. I couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Just loaded another shell. Muscle memory taking over when thought failed. Hit! We got a hit! Sasha's voice, distant and muffled through the ringing in my ears. I pressed my face to the vision slit, squinting through smoke and dust. The Tiger's side was torn open, flames pouring from the wound. Its turret hatch flew open and a figure crawled out, engulfed in fire, stumbling, falling. The image burned into my mind even as I tried to look away. Target down! Target! The explosion came from behind us. Louder, closer. Our tank rocked. I grabbed for a handhold, missed, slammed my shoulder against the ammunition rack. Through the chaos, through the ringing and the shouting, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. Screaming, not ours. The tank behind us, the lead tank of our column, had taken a direct hit. Through the vision slit, I watched it burn. Black smoke poured from every hatch. Flames danced along the turret. And somewhere inside that steel coffin, men were dying. Move, flank left. Leonov's voice cracked with urgency. We're sitting ducks here. The radio erupted in overlapping voices, panic, orders, death rattles. Under fire. Crew down. Can't see. God, oh God. Static drowned them out. We surged forward, engine howling. Yuri took a hard left turn, nearly throwing me from my seat. The world outside became a blur of gray stone and orange fire. Buildings rushed past. Shadows moved in windows. Snipers, civilians, ghosts. A figure darted across the street ahead. German uniform. He raised something. A Panzerfaust. Gunner! But Yuri saw him first. Cranked the wheel hard but right. The rocket streaked past, so close I felt the heat through the vision slit. It hit the building behind us. Bricks exploded outward like shrapnel. We didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Another tank from our column pulled alongside, turret traversing, searching for targets. Through the smoke, I could see the commander standing in the open hatch, waving us forward. His mouth moved, but I couldn't hear the words over the chaos. Then his head snapped back. Sniper. He slumped forward, half in, half out of the hatch. The tank rolled on for another 10 meters before grinding to a halt, driverless, purposeless, dead. Jesus Christ, Sasha whispered beside me. The street ahead widened into a plaza. The Reichstag should have been visible from here, but smoke obscured everything. We pushed through, blind, following the vague shapes of other tanks in the haze. Artillery shells began to fall like rain. Not the scattered bombardment from before, but a sustained barrage. The ground erupted in geysers of dirt and stone. Each explosion shook the tank, rattled my teeth, made breathing feel like drowning. Through the chaos, through the fire and thunder, I caught glimpses of the war's true face. A German soldier running with his hands up, cut down by machine gun fire. A Soviet infantryman stumbling forward, half his face gone. A child's doll lying in the street, one arm missing, dress stained with ash and blood. This was victory. This was liberation. This was hell with a different flag. Where's the infantry support? I screamed over the noise. Dead or lost? Leonov shouted back. Keep moving. We can't stop now. but something in his voice had changed. The certainty was gone, replaced by something rawer, something closer to fear. We turned onto Wilhelmstrasse. The pavement was cratered, pocked with shell holes filled with black water. Buildings leaned like broken teeth, ready to fall. Fire poured from upper windows. Smoke choked the air until breathing felt like inhaling glass. Another shell hit. Closer this time. The building to our right exploded. Bricks cascaded down like an avalanche, bouncing off our turret, cracking against the vision slits. For a moment, the world went dark, buried under debris. Then we broke through, emerging on the other side, and I saw it. The plaza ahead, the steps, the columns, the Reichstag. There. Leonov's voice cracked with something between triumph and terror. We're almost... The shell hit our left track. The explosion lifted the entire tank sideways. Metal screamed. Something in the engine compartment burst. Smoke poured in through every gap and seal. Heat washed over me like opening an oven door. "We're hit! We're hit!" Yuri was shouting, hands frozen on the controls. The tank shuddered, listing to one side, treads grinding uselessly against stone. "Evacuate!" Leonov screamed. "Out! Everybody out!" I grabbed my rifle, pulled the hatch release. The metal was hot enough to burn my palm, but I didn't care. I pushed it open, and smoke flooded in, thick and black and suffocating. Sasha went first, hauling himself up and out. I followed, choking, eyes streaming. My boots hit cobblestone and I stumbled, legs weak from adrenaline and fear. Behind us, our T-34 was dying. Smoke poured from the engine compartment. The left track lay in pieces, links scattered like broken vertebrae. The turret pointed uselessly skyward. Around us, the battle raged on. Tanks burned like furnaces. Infantry ran through smoke and chaos, firing at shadows. The air tasted like metal and ash and death. I turned once, looked back at our tank. The barrel drooped, glowing red at the tip. Then a bullet hit the pavement inches from my boot, spraying chips of stone against my leg. "Sniper, run!" someone screamed. And the world collapsed into pure survival. We plunged into hell. I ran without thinking, legs pumping, lungs burning, rifle clutched against my chest. Sasha was ahead of me, darting toward a crater in the street. Leonov stumbled behind, one hand pressed against his ribs where he'd hit the hatch frame on the way out. Another shot cracked the air. The bullet pinged off metal somewhere behind us. I dove into the crater, landing hard on my shoulder. The impact drove the air from my lungs. For a moment, I just lay there, face pressed against cold stone and mud, tasting dirt and cordite, listening to my heartbeat hammer in my ears. "Yuri!" Leonov gasped beside me. "Where's Yuri?" I rolled over, looked back through the smoke. Our tank sat 20 meters away, wreathed in black smoke. Flames beginning to lick along the engine compartment. The hatches stood open like screaming mouths, but no one else climbed out. "Yuri!" I screamed. Nothing. Sasha grabbed my shoulder as I started to rise. "Don't! We don't know that. Look at it, Dmitri. Look at the smoke. If he's still inside." The fuel tank exploded. The fireball rose 15 meters into the air, a blooming flower of orange and black. The heat washed over us, even at this distance, singeing eyebrows, drying the sweat on my face. Debris rained down, pieces of armor plating, fragments of tread, things I didn't want to identify. When the smoke cleared, our T-34 was a burning skeleton. Yuri was gone. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The crater seemed to tilt and spin around me. Yuri, who'd shared his last cigarette with me 2 days ago, who'd shown me photos of his wife and their newborn son he'd never met, who'd smiled through Kursk and Stalingrad and every nightmare between. Gone. Just gone. Like he'd never existed at all. Dmitri. Leonov's voice cut through the fog. Dmitri, stay with me. We need to move. I looked at him. His face was streaked with soot and blood from a cut above his eye. His hands shook as he checked his pistol, but his eyes were steady, focused, pulling me back from the edge. 2 tanks lost, he said, more to himself than to us. Radio's dead. Infantry support. He glanced around the burning street. Dead or scattered. We're on our own. What do we do? Sasha asked. His voice sounded young, uncertain. The smile was gone. Leonov pointed through the smoke toward a cluster of buildings. Beyond them, barely visible through the haze, rose the dark silhouette of the Reichstag dome. We finish the mission, on foot if we have to. That's suicide, I said. So is staying here. Another shell screamed overhead, impacting somewhere behind us. The shock wave pressed us deeper into the crater. When I dared to look up, I saw them, Soviet infantry emerging from side streets, moving in loose formations through the rubble. Some ran, some crawled, some just stood there, dazed, like men waking from nightmares into worse nightmares. An officer I didn't recognize waved us forward. Move up! Move up! The Reichstag is 2 blocks ahead. We climbed out of the crater. My legs felt like water. The rifle in my hands suddenly weighed 1,000 kilograms. But I moved anyway, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering Yuri's face when he'd asked if I was ready. No, I'd said. Good. Means you're still human. The street ahead was a graveyard of machines. A Panther tank sat at an angle, nose buried in a collapsed building. Its turret had been blown clean off, lying upside down 10 meters away like a discarded helmet. Soviet infantry used the hull for cover, firing at windows above. We ran past a burned-out truck, its tires still smoking. Past a crater so deep I couldn't see the bottom. Past bodies, German, Soviet, civilian, all the same color now. All equally silent. The buildings pressed in on both sides, leaning inward like they might collapse and bury us all. Windows gaped empty and dark. Every shadow held a threat. Every doorway hid death. An MG-42 opened up from somewhere above, that distinctive tearing canvas sound that meant German machine gun. Bullets chewed up the pavement, sparking off stone, whining as they ricocheted. We pressed against a wall, making ourselves small, invisible, praying. The gun fell silent. Someone had silenced it. Or it ran out of ammunition. I didn't care which. We pushed forward. The smoke thinned for a moment, and I saw the full scope of the destruction. Wilhelmstrasse Bay stretched ahead like a tunnel through hell. Every building damaged, every street cratered. Tram tracks twisted into abstract sculptures. A bronze statue lay on its side, the proud horse and rider reduced to a memorial for nothing. Water? Sasha croaked beside me. A soldier pressed a canteen into his hands. Drink fast, we're moving. The water tasted like metal and rust, but I didn't care. It cut through the ash coating my throat. For a brief moment, I felt almost human. You from the tank column? The soldier asked. He was young, maybe 19, with a face that belonged in a classroom, not here. Was, I said. Not anymore. He nodded like that explained everything. Maybe it did. We moved as a mass now. Tankers without tanks, infantry without support, all of us just survivors trying to reach the end before the end reached us. Someone up front had a flag, the red cloth torn and stained, but still recognizable, still meaning something. The Moltke Bridge appeared through the smoke. The Spree River flowed beneath, black and thick with debris. A German half-track lay overturned in the water, slowly sinking. Bodies floated past like autumn leaves. "Cross." The officer waved us forward. "Quickly." We ran across the bridge, boots echoing on metal grating. I kept my eyes forward, refused to look down at the river, at what it carried. Some things you don't need to see to remember. The Reichstag dome shimmered ahead through the haze, a black crown waiting for judgment. So close now, 100 meters. Less. The air thickened as we approached, not just with smoke, but with something heavier. Desperation, maybe. The last gasps of a dying empire. Bullets cracked from upper windows. We dove behind a wrecked Panther tank, the irony not lost on me that German armor now protected Soviet infantry. Its frontal plate was scarred and pitted, testament to weapons that couldn't quite kill it. But the crew was dead anyway. I could see them through the open hatch, slumped and still. "Funny," Sasha muttered beside me, voice hollow. "They called this the capital of the world." "Now it's the capital of ghosts," I said. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the same thing in his eyes that I felt in my chest. We weren't just tired. We were breaking. The war had finally found the cracks in our armor and was prying them open, exposing everything soft and vulnerable underneath. I fumbled for a new magazine, hands shaking so badly I dropped it twice before getting it seated. The metal was cold, solid, real. Something to focus on that wasn't death or fire or the memory of Yuri's smile. Around us, the battle intensified. Mortars fell in clusters, turning the plaza into a moonscape of craters. A Soviet tank, a surviving T-34, rumbled past, its gun traversing, searching for targets. It fired once, the muzzle flash blinding. Somewhere, a building collapsed. "How many of us are left?" I asked, no one in particular. No one answered. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't want to count. Leonov reloaded his pistol with methodical precision, each movement controlled despite the chaos around us. "Stay close," he said. "When we move together. Understand?" We nodded. But before we could move, the world lit up. Flares burst overhead, white phosphorus turning night into day, casting everything in harsh, shadowless light. For a moment, I saw it all with terrible clarity. The Reichstag steps 100 meters ahead, German soldiers regrouping behind barricades, gun emplacements dug into the marble, and hundreds of them. Hundreds. Christ. Sasha breathed. They'd been waiting, setting up, preparing for this final stand. The flare light illuminated their faces. Young men, old men, boys barely old enough to shave. All of them with the same look. The look of people who knew they were already dead, but were too stubborn or too terrified to stop fighting. I recognized that look. I'd seen it in mirrors. "New orders," someone shouted through the chaos. An officer I'd never seen before, uniform torn, face bloody. "All units advance. The Reichstag must fall today." Today, as if timing mattered to the dead. But we moved anyway, crawling from behind the Panther, joining the tide of Soviet infantry surging forward. Not because we believed in glory, not even because we believed in victory. We moved because stopping meant being alone with our thoughts, and that was worse than any bullet. The German machine guns opened up. The world became tracers and screams. Men fell like wheat before a scythe. I ran hunched over, trying to make myself small, invisible, already dead, so death might pass me by. Ancient superstition. Soldier's prayer. We reached a shell crater and dropped into it. 5 of us now. Me, Sasha, Leonov, and 2 infantry soldiers I didn't know. One of them was bleeding from his leg, teeth gritted against the pain. "Medic," Sasha called. "Medics are back there," the wounded man gasped, jerking his thumb toward the smoke behind us. Or dead. Probably dead. I tore a strip from my undershirt, wrapped it around his leg, pulled it tight. He hissed in pain, but didn't scream. We were all beyond screaming. Through the smoke, I watched the Soviet advance stall. Dozens of men pinned down, unable to move forward or back. The Reichstag steps had become a killing field, and we were the crop. Leonov peered over the crater's edge, ducked back down as bullets chewed up the earth above his head. "We can't stay here. They've got the high ground, clear fields of fire. We're dead if we stay." "We're dead if we move," one of the infantry soldiers said. "Then we die moving forward." Leonov checked his pistol again. Better than dying in a hole. I looked at Sasha. His face was pale beneath the soot, eyes wide. But he nodded, always following, always trusting. I thought about Katya then, about Anya, about the photograph in my pocket, probably torn and bloody now. I thought about what I would tell them if I could, that I loved them, that I was sorry, that I hoped this was worth it. But there was no time for letters, no time for goodbye. The order came down the line, passed from crater to crater, soldier to soldier. "Advance on my mark." I gripped my rifle tighter, felt the weight of it, the reality of it. This was it, the moment where courage and stupidity became the same thing. 3, 2, 1, now! We rose from the crater like the dead climbing from graves, and the Reichstag answered with fire. We moved on foot like ghosts through a burning world. The advance had fractured into chaos. No clear lines, no organized assault, just clusters of men pushing forward through smoke and rubble, each group isolated in their own pocket of hell. Soviet infantry merged from side streets, their faces mirrors of our own, exhausted, terrified, determined. We were all the same now. Tank crew, rifleman, officer, conscript, just survivors trying to reach the end. A soldier stumbled past me, clutching his stomach, blood seeping between his fingers. He didn't cry out, didn't ask for help, just kept walking until he couldn't anymore. Then sat down against a wall and closed his eyes. I wanted to stop, wanted to help. But Leonov pulled me forward. "Keep moving. We can't save everyone." The words hit me like a slap, but I knew he was right. Stopping meant joining the bodies. Moving meant maybe, just maybe, living another hour. We pushed through the skeleton of a burned building, walls still standing, but everything inside gutted by fire. Our boots crunched on broken glass and collapsed ceiling beams. Somewhere overhead, a rafter creaked ominously. The whole structure felt ready to collapse. But we moved through it anyway, because the street outside was worse. When we emerged on the other side, I saw the Moltke Bridge properly for the first time. The Spree River churned beneath it, black water thick with ash and debris. Bodies floated past, too many to count, too many to acknowledge. German helmets, Soviet caps, all heading downstream together, united in death the way they never were in life. "Careful on the bridge," Leonov warned. "Mines." We crossed single file, each step deliberate, watching where the soldiers ahead had walked. The metal grating was slick with something I didn't want to identify. Halfway across, an explosion erupted from the far bank. Not close enough to hurt us, but close enough to feel the heat, to smell the cordite. I glanced down at the river despite myself. The water reflected fire, making it look like the spree itself was burning. Maybe it was. Maybe everything was burning now, and we just hadn't noticed. On the far side, we took cover behind a massive concrete barrier, part of the bridge's original construction, now pockmarked with bullet holes. Sasha pressed his back against it, breathing hard, eyes distant. "You all right?" I asked. He didn't answer for a moment. Then, "Yuri had a son. Did you know that? Born 3 months ago. He'd never even seen him. Just a photograph his wife sent." I had known. Yuri had shown me that photograph a dozen times, worn soft at the edges from being pulled out and looked at and put away again. A tiny face, wrinkled and red, eyes closed. "Ivan," Yuri had said. "After my father." "He should have made it," Sasha continued, voice cracking. "Should have made it home to meet his boy." "Yeah," I said. "He should have." But should didn't mean anything here. Should was a word for a world that still made sense, where good men lived and bad men died, and everything balanced out in the end. We'd left that world somewhere behind us, buried under 1,000 nameless graves. An infantry soldier dropped down beside us, handed me a canteen. "Comrade, you from the tank column?" "Was," I said, taking the water gratefully. "Not anymore." The water was warm and tasted like rust, but I drank it anyway. Felt it cut through the ash, coating my throat. When I handed the canteen back, my hands were shaking. I couldn't remember when that had started. Couldn't remember when they'd stopped. "Looks bad ahead," the soldier said, nodding toward the Reichstag. Through gaps in the smoke, I could see it properly now. Massive stone steps leading up to columns and shattered doors. German soldiers moved behind barricades, repositioning machine guns, preparing for the final defense. "It's all bad," Sasha muttered. The soldier laughed, a short, bitter sound. "True enough." He checked his rifle, chambered a round. "But orders are orders. We take that building or die trying." "Probably both," I said. He looked at me, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Understanding, maybe, or just shared resignation. Then he moved on, disappearing into the smoke with a group of infantry pushing forward. We followed. The Reichstag loomed larger with each step, growing from silhouette into solid reality. The dome rose above the smoke like a black crown, Hitler's seat of power, the symbolic heart of the Reich. Soon it would be ours. Soon we would plant our flag on its ruins. Victory, they called it. But as we pushed through debris-strewn streets, past burning vehicles and shattered statues, I wondered what victory actually meant. Would the flag erase the faces of the dead? Would it bring Yuri back? Would it let me forget the sound of that boy's rifle falling from his hands? "Dmitri." I looked up. Leonov was watching me, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Stay focused," he said. "I need you here, not wherever your mind just went." "I'm here." "Are you?" I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him I was fine, that I could do this, that I was the same soldier who'd loaded shells and followed orders and never questioned anything. But the words stuck in my throat. Because he was right. Part of me was still in that crater, watching Yuri's tank explode. Part of me was back at Kursk. Part of me was sitting at a kitchen table with Katya, laughing about something that didn't matter. Living a life that felt like someone else's dream. War doesn't teach courage, I said quietly. It just demands it, even when there's nothing left to give. Leonov studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. That's the truest thing anyone said all day. We moved forward through what had once been a park. The trees were stripped bare, reduced to blackened skeletons reaching toward an ash-gray sky. Craters pocked the ground where flower beds used to be. A child's swing hung from a half-destroyed frame, swaying gently in the wind, creaking with each movement. The sound made my skin crawl. "Keep low," someone shouted. Bullets cracked overhead, that distinctive snap that meant they were close. We dropped behind a low stone wall, probably once the border of the park, now just another piece of cover in an urban battlefield. I peered over the edge. The Reichstag steps were 50 meters ahead now. So close I could see individual German soldiers, see their faces, see the fear and determination that mirrored our own. They were just men. Young, old, scared, brave. Just men doing what they thought they had to do. And we were going to kill them. Or they were going to kill us, maybe both. "Mortars," Leonov pointed. I followed his finger and saw them. Soviet mortar teams setting up in the ruins behind us, angling their tubes toward the Reichstag. The crews worked with practiced efficiency, loading, adjusting, firing. The shells arced overhead with that distinctive whistle thump, impacting on the Reichstag's facade in flowers of fire and stone. The German return fire came immediately. Artillery shells screamed down, turning the park into a hellscape of explosions. We pressed ourselves flat against the wall, feeling each impact through the ground, through our bones. A shell hit 10 meters away. The shockwave lifted me off the ground, slammed me back down. My ears rang, my vision blurred. When it cleared, the wall we'd been hiding behind was half destroyed. And Sasha was lying on his side, hands over his head, lips moving in what might have been prayer or just wordless terror. I crawled to him, grabbed his shoulder. "Sasha!" He looked up, eyes wild. I can't do this anymore, Dmitri. I can't." "Yes, you can." "Yuri's dead. Half our column is dead. We're going to die here, and nobody will remember. Nobody will care." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. Wanted to promise that we'd survive, that we'd go home, that this would all mean something in the end. But I'd promised too many lies already. "Maybe you're right," I said instead. "Maybe nobody will remember. But Katya will remember me. Your mother will remember you. That has to be enough." He stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Then slowly, he nodded, rose to his knees, checked his rifle with shaking hands. "Together?" he asked. "Together," I said. The barrage intensified. More Soviet tanks arrived from side streets, their guns adding to the chaos. Infantry surged forward in waves, firing as they ran, falling as German machine guns cut them down. The Reichstag steps became a carpet of bodies, but still we pushed forward. Because that's what soldiers do. Not because we're brave, not because we want to. Because stopping means thinking, and thinking means breaking. And breaking means admitting that everything we've done, everyone we've lost, might not mean anything at all. "Forward!" The order echoed down the line. We rose from behind the ruined wall and joined the tide of men surging toward the Reichstag, toward the heart of the beast, toward whatever ending waited for us on those blood-soaked steps. The streets of Berlin were veins, I thought as I ran. and they were still bleating lies. Above us, a flare burst in the smoke-choked sky, illuminating hundreds of German soldiers regrouping near the Reichstag entrance. They raised their weapons as one, a wall of steel in desperation. And somewhere in the chaos, someone was screaming my name. The screaming resolved into a voice I recognized. Dmitri, left flank. I spun, rifle up, and saw him. Leonov, waving frantically from behind an overturned truck. German soldiers were repositioning behind rubble 30 meters from his position, trying to flank our advance. I ran, legs burning, lungs screaming for air that wasn't full of smoke and ash. Sasha followed, both of us zigzagging through the debris field, trying to be small, trying to be fast, trying to be invisible to the bullets that snapped past our heads. We dove behind the truck. The metal was hot, scorched from some earlier fire. Through the gaps in the chassis, I could see German infantry moving between buildings, their gray uniforms blending with the smoke and stone. Snipers in the upper floors. Leonov gasped, pointing. They're picking off anyone who gets close to the steps. I looked up. The buildings flanking the Reichstag were riddled with windows, perfect positions for marksmen. As I watched, a Soviet soldier 50 meters ahead clutched his throat and fell. Clean shot. Professional. We need to clear those buildings, I said. Infantry's trying. They're getting shredded. Another wave of Soviet soldiers pushed forward, using rubble and burned vehicles for cover. They made it 20 meters before German machine gun fire cut them down. The few who survived scattered, pressing themselves into shell craters, anything to escape the killing field. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a slaughter. There. Sasha pointed to a side street, partially collapsed but still passable. We can flank through there, get to the buildings from behind. Leonov studied it, weighing the risk, then nodded. Go. Stay low. Move fast. We moved. The side street was a tunnel of debris, collapsed walls creating a maze of stone and twisted metal. We had to climb over wreckage, squeeze through gaps barely wide enough for a man. My rifle caught on everything, slowing me down. But I couldn't abandon it. Without the weapon, I was just meat waiting to be killed. Halfway through, we heard voices. German. Close. We froze, pressing against a partially destroyed wall. Through a crack, I could see them. 3 soldiers, young, talking in hushed, urgent tones. One was wounded, blood soaking through his tunic. Another was trying to bandage him while the third kept watch. They looked exhausted, terrified, human. We could have killed them, should have killed them. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the wounded one's face, couldn't have been more than 17. Maybe it was how the other soldier's hands shook as he tried to tie the bandage. Maybe I was just tired of death. Leonov made the decision for me, signaling to move past quietly. We slipped through the shadows, leaving them alive. 2 minutes later, we heard gunfire from that direction. Brief, violent. Then silence. Someone else had made a different choice. We emerged into a courtyard behind the Reichstag adjacent buildings. The space was cluttered with abandoned equipment, ammunition crates, a broken radio, backpacks left behind by soldiers who either fled or died. The ground was scorched in places, pockmarked with shrapnel scars. And in the center, standing in a doorway, was a boy. Not a soldier. A boy. He couldn't have been more than 14, thin as a rail, swimming in a uniform that was clearly not his. Hitler Youth insignia on the collar, a rifle in his hands, too big for him, barrel wavering as he pointed it at us. Halt! His voice cracked. Don't move. We stopped. Time seemed to slow, to thicken. I could see everything with terrible clarity. The fear in his eyes, the way his finger trembled on the trigger, the slight movement of his chest as he breathed too fast, hyperventilating. "Easy," Leonov said softly, raising one hand. "Easy, boy. You don't want to do this." I have orders." The rifle shook harder. You can't come through here." "We don't want to hurt you," I said, and meant it. "Put down the rifle. This war is over. You can go home." "Liar!" Tears cut tracks through the ash on his face. "You're lying. We're going to win. The Führer said—" "The Führer is dead," Sasha said flatly. "Or will be soon. This is done. You don't have to die for him." The boy's face crumpled, confusion and terror warring with whatever propaganda had been hammered into his skull. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't," I started to say. But the shot came first. It went wide, splintering stone beside my head. Instinct took over. I dropped, rolled right. Heard Sasha curse, heard the boy's rifle action cycling, trying to chamber another round but fumbling it. "Wait," I shouted. "Don't shoot." But Sasha's rifle was already up. The shot echoed in the courtyard, impossibly loud. The boy jerked backward, hit the doorframe, slid down. The rifle clattered from his hands. For a moment he just sat there, back against the wall, eyes wide with surprise more than pain. Then blood spread across his chest, dark and fast. "No." The word came out broken, confused. "No, I was supposed to. Mother said I should." He stopped. His eyes stayed open, but the light behind them faded like someone turning down a lamp. The silence that followed was worse than any explosion. Sasha lowered his rifle slowly, staring at what he'd done. His face had gone pale, skin stretched tight over bones. "He was armed," Sasha said to no one. "He shot first. He was armed." I wanted to agree, wanted to tell him it was justified, necessary, the right choice. But the words stuck in my throat because all I could see was that boy's face. The confusion, the fear, the way he'd called for his mother as he died. Leonov moved forward, checked the body with professional detachment, closed the boy's eyes, picked up the rifle, an old Kar 98K, bolt action, the kind they gave to home guard units when they ran out of everything else. "Hitler Youth," Leonov said quietly. "They're arming children now." "He was going to kill us," Sasha repeated, voice rising. "He shot at us. I didn't have a choice." "I know," I said, though I'm not sure if I believed it. We stood there in that courtyard, surrounded by the debris of a dying empire, and I felt something break inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. This was what victory demanded. Not just soldiers dying in battle, but boys dying in doorways. Not just armies clashing, but mothers somewhere learning their children were never coming home. Not just defeating an enemy, but becoming the kind of people who could kill children and call it necessary. I thought about Anya, my daughter, 7 years old now. I'd missed 3 of her birthdays. I thought about her growing up in a world where men like us did things like this and called it liberation. "We need to move," Leonov said, but his voice was hollow. Even he seemed shaken, and I'd never seen anything shake him before. We stepped past the body, tried not to look, failed. The building's stairwell was dark, lit only by gaps in the walls where shells had punched through. We climbed in silence, boots echoing on concrete. Each floor we passed showed signs of hasty evacuation. Papers scattered, chairs overturned, a photograph of someone's family lying in a puddle of stagnant water. On the 3rd floor, we found the sniper position, empty now. The rifle lay abandoned by the window, 3 spent casings beside it. Blood on the floor. Someone had been wounded here, dragged away by comrades who were probably dead themselves now. I looked out the window and saw the full scope of the battle. The Reichstag steps were covered in bodies, Soviet, German, impossible to distinguish at this distance. Tanks burned like candles. Smoke rose in columns that merged into a single black sky. And somewhere down there, men were still fighting, still dying, still believing that the next minute, the next hour, the next sacrifice would be the one that mattered. "What are we doing?" I whispered. Leonov looked at me sharply. "Ending the war." "Are we?" I gestured at the carnage below. "Or are we just continuing it? With a different flag?" "Don't," Leonov warned. "Don't go there. We're not them. What we're fighting for." "What are we fighting for?" I interrupted. "We tell ourselves it's freedom, justice. But that boy back there, he thought he was fighting for those things too. We're all fighting for something, and we're all killing for it. And at what point does it stop mattering who's right?" "It matters," Sasha said, but his voice was uncertain. "It has to matter." A shell screamed overhead, impacting on the Reichstag's facade. The building shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. "Forward," Leonov commanded. "The mission doesn't change just because it's hard." He was right. And he was wrong. And I was too tired, too broken, too haunted by a dead boy's face to know which mattered more. We descended the stairs, back into the smoke and fire. But something had changed. Not in the battle. In me. I'd come to Berlin to end Hitler's tyranny, to free the world from darkness. I'd believed it completely, with every fiber of my being. Now, stepping over the body of a child soldier, I wondered if we'd lost whatever we were supposed to be saving. The Reichstag loomed ahead through the smoke, and behind us, in a forgotten courtyard, a mother's son lay cooling in the ash. The world exploded, not metaphorically, not gradually, all at once, like God had reached down and decided to erase Berlin from existence. Artillery shells rained from the sky in a curtain of fire and steel. Soviet Katyusha rockets screamed overhead, their distinctive wail cutting through every other sound. The Reichstag's facade erupted in cascading explosions, marble and stone vaporizing into lethal shrapnel. The ground beneath my feet bucked and heaved like a living thing trying to throw me off. "Go! Go! Go!" Someone was screaming the order, but I couldn't tell who. Couldn't tell if it was Leonov or some other officer or just the collective voice of every Soviet soldier who'd made it this far and refused to die before reaching those steps. We ran, not tactically, not with precision or strategy. We ran like men possessed, like the damned fleeing hells only to find hell waiting ahead. The smoke was so thick I could barely see Sasha beside me, just a shadow moving through gray haze lit orange by fire. The Reichstag steps materialized from the smoke like a wall, vast and impossible. Bodies covered every surface, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Soviet soldiers who'd tried this exact charge minutes ago, hours ago. Some were still moving, crawling, reaching. Most weren't. "Grenade!" I threw myself flat as the explosion tore through the air where I'd been standing. Shrapnel whistled overhead, pinging off stone. My ears rang so badly I couldn't hear my own breathing, just a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. Hands grabbed my collar, hauled me up. Leonov's face appeared inches from mine, mouth moving, shouting something I couldn't hear. He pointed forward, then shoved me. I ran. A German machine gun opened up from the upper landing, tracers cutting through the smoke in lazy red arcs that belied their lethal speed. Men fell around me, cut down mid-stride. One soldier made it 5 steps before his legs gave out. Another's helmet flew off, spinning through the air like a discarded toy. I zigged left, jumped over a crater, landed wrong, felt my ankle protest, but didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Stopping meant dying. The first step. My boot hit marble, slick with blood, and something else. I slipped, caught myself with one hand, kept climbing. Second step, third, fourth. The machine gun swung toward me. I could see the muzzle flash, see the barrel tracking, and knew with absolute certainty I was about to die. This was it. The moment every soldier knows is coming but never quite believes until... Sasha tackled me from the side. We tumbled together, rolling, limbs tangled. The bullets chewed up the step where I'd been standing, throwing up chunks of marble. We slammed into a body, already dead, already cold, and used it for cover. "Flag!" Sasha screamed in my ear, the first word I'd heard clearly since the barrage started. "Where's the flag?" I looked around wildly. Through the chaos, through the smoke and fire and dying men, I saw it. A flash of red cloth 20 meters away, clutched in the hands of a soldier I didn't know. He was crawling up the steps, one leg trailing behind him uselessly, dragging the flag like it weighed 1,000 kilograms. He made it 3 more meters before a bullet found him. The flag fell. No. I didn't realize I was the one screaming until my throat burned with it. I launched myself forward, scrambling over bodies and debris, fingers reaching for that red cloth. Bullets kicked up stone around me. A shell exploded to my right, the shockwave lifting me off my feet, slamming me down hard enough to drive the air from my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think. But my hand closed around the flagpole. I pulled it toward me, felt the weight of it, the reality of it. This scrap of cloth was what we'd crossed a continent for, what Yuri had died for, what that boy in the courtyard had died trying to stop. It felt like nothing, like everything. "Dmitri!" Leonov appeared beside me, his face a mask of blood and soot. Half his uniform was burned away. "The top! We have to reach the top." I looked up. Through the smoke, I could see it. The entrance to the Reichstag, massive doors blown off their hinges, darkness beyond. And above that, the dome, Hitler's crown, the symbol of everything we'd fought against. So close, impossibly far. Between us and that entrance were 2 more landings, dozens of German soldiers, machine gun nests, and a killing field that had already claimed more lives than I could count. "We'll never make it," I said. "We will." Leonov grabbed my shoulder, looked me dead in the eye. "Because if we don't, they win. All of them, every man who died getting us here, they die for nothing. You understand me? For nothing." A tank appeared from the smoke behind us. A surviving T-34, turret traversing, searching for targets. Its gun fired, the muzzle blast washing over us in a wave of heat and pressure. The shell hit the Reichstag's entrance, collapsing part of the archway. German soldiers scattered. "Now!" Leonov screamed. "While they're scattered, we charged." Time fractured into moments, each one crystal clear and impossibly fast. Running up marble steps turned slick with blood, boots slipping, catching, pushing forward. Sasha beside me, firing his rifle from the hip, not aiming, just filling the air with lead. A German soldier appearing from behind a column, so close I could see the stubble on his jaw, raising his rifle, and Leonov shooting him before I could even react. The machine gun opening up again, stitching a line of bullets that missed me by centimeters, hitting the soldier behind me instead. Reaching the second landing, diving behind a shattered statue, lungs burning, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Looking back and seeing the trail of bodies we'd left. The carpet of dead and dying that marked our advance like breadcrumbs to hell. A grenade landed 2 meters away. I saw it hit, saw it bounce, saw it settle in a crack in the marble, and knew there was no time to run, no time to throw it back, no time for anything but... Sasha kicked it. The grenade spun through the air, arcing over the edge of the landing, disappearing into the smoke below. The explosion came a heartbeat later, muffled by distance, but still powerful enough to shake the steps beneath us. "You insane bastard," I gasped. He grinned. That same damn grin, even now, even here. Had to be done. More Soviet soldiers reached the landing, maybe a dozen, maybe more. We'd become a critical mass, enough that the German defenders couldn't stop us with scattered fire. We were a wave now, inevitable, unstoppable. An officer I'd never seen before, uniform torn, face blackened with powder burns, stood and raised his pistol. "Forward, for the motherland!" We surged up the final approach. The stairs became a gauntlet of fire. Grenades fell from above, exploding in bursts of white-hot shrapnel. Machine guns fired from multiple positions, crossfire turning the air into solid lead. Men fell with every step, but for everyone who fell, 2 more pushed forward. I clutched the flag in one hand, rifle in the other, and ran through hell. A German soldier stepped from a doorway directly in front of me, rifle raised. We locked eyes for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to see that he was young, terrified, and about to pull the trigger. I was faster. My rifle fired. He fell. I stepped over him without stopping. The entrance loomed ahead, those massive blown-out doors now just a gaping mouth waiting to swallow us. I could see inside, darkness, rubble, the flicker of fires deeper within. 10 meters. 5. A shell hit the column beside the entrance. The entire structure groaned, stone grinding against stone. For a moment I thought the whole facade would collapse, bury us all under tons of marble and Hitler's broken dreams. But it held. We plunged into the darkness. The interior of the Reichstag was a cathedral of destruction. The ceiling had partially collapsed, letting in shafts of smoke-filtered light that illuminated a scene from the end of the world. Furniture piled as barricades, papers scattered everywhere like snow, shell holes big enough to drive a truck through. And Germans. Dozens of them, fighting from behind improvised cover, making the Reich's final stand. The battle became claustrophobic, brutal. No long sight lines, no tactical maneuvering. Just close-quarters carnage, rifle butts and bayonets and point-blank shooting. The air filled with screams and smoke and the metallic smell of blood. I lost track of Leonov, lost track of Sasha, lost track of everything except the flag in my hand and the single burning imperative. Up. I had to get up. To the roof. To the dome. A stairwell appeared through the smoke. Half destroyed, steps missing, but climbable. Soviet soldiers were already swarming up it, fighting German defenders on every landing. I joined them, using the flagpole as a weapon when my rifle ran dry, striking, pushing, clawing my way higher. 3rd floor, 4th, 5th. My legs screamed in protest. My lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. Blood ran from a dozen cuts I couldn't remember receiving, but I climbed. On the 6th floor, I emerged into chaos. The interior walls were gone, leaving just a vast, open space with the dome visible above. Soviet soldiers and German defenders were locked in desperate hand-to-hand combat. A grenade exploded, throwing men like rag dolls. Somewhere, someone was screaming for a medic. "The roof!" A voice cut through the madness. "Someone get that flag to the roof!" I looked up. There, a ladder, leading to a hatch that opened to the exterior. I ran for it. A German soldier intercepted me, tackling me from the side. We went down together, grappling, rolling. His hands found my throat, squeezed. Black spots danced in my vision. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't. My hand found a piece of rubble. I swung it, felt it connect with something solid. The pressure on my throat released. I stumbled to my feet, grabbed the flag, lurched toward the ladder. "Dmitri!" Sasha appeared from the smoke, uniform torn, face bloodied, but alive. He was alive. "Go!" he shouted, providing covering fire as I started to climb. The ladder was slick with something I didn't want to identify. Each rung was agony, my muscles screaming, but I climbed. Hand over hand, over hand. The hatch was blown open, bent metal scraping my shoulders as I squeezed through. And then I was outside. The roof of the Reichstag was a wasteland of broken stone and twisted metal. The dome rose behind me, pockmarked with shell holes, but still standing, still defiant. Wind whipped around me, carrying smoke and ash and the sound of battle from below. Berlin spread out in every direction, a burning city, an empire's corpse. I stumbled forward, legs barely working, flag clutched in both hands now, looking for somewhere, anywhere, to plant it. Machine gun fire erupted behind me. I spun, German soldiers emerging from another hatch, raising weapons. No time to think. I ran toward the edge of the roof, toward a section of broken railing where rubble had piled high enough to jam the flagpole. Bullets whistled past my head. One grazed my shoulder, spinning me halfway around. Another hit the flagpole, sending splinters of wood flying. I kept running. 10 meters. 5. I could see the perfect spot. A gap in the stone where the pole would fit, where it would stand, where everyone could see. A bullet hit my leg. I didn't feel it at first, just a sudden loss of support. Then pain exploded through me, white-hot and all-consuming. I fell, hit the roof hard, slid toward the edge. The flag slipped from my hands. No! I lunged for it, fingers closing around the pole even as my body started to slide over the edge. Below was a 6-story drop to cobblestones covered in bodies. My other hand found a piece of rebar, bent and rusted, jutting from the broken roof. I held on, the metal cutting into my palm, flag in one hand, death in the other. Someone was screaming my name. I looked back. Sasha had emerged from the hatch, was running toward me, firing at the Germans. Leonov was right behind him, face set in grim determination. "Throw it!" Leonov shouted. "Throw the flag!" I looked at the pole in my hand, looked at the pile of rubble 3 meters away. It was impossible. I couldn't reach it. Couldn't. I threw. The flag spun through the air, red cloth unfurling like a banner of blood and hope and everything we'd lost to get here. It hit the rubble, bounced, started to fall. A hand caught it. Leonov. He'd thrown himself forward, sliding across the roof, and caught the flag just before it went over the edge. Without hesitating, he jammed the pole into the rubble, drove it down with both hands, wedged it with stones until it held. The red flag caught the wind. It rose above the smoke, above the fire, above the shattered dome of Hitler's Reichstag. For one perfect moment, everything stopped. The German soldiers lowered their weapons, staring. The Soviet soldiers emerging from the hatch froze. Even the sounds of battle seemed to fade. We'd done it. Victory. Then the world exploded again. A shell, German, a final desperate artillery shot, hit the roof 10 meters away. The blast picked me up like a child's toy and threw me backward. I lost my grip on the rebar, lost my grip on everything. I fell. Not off the building, just backward, slamming into the roof, head cracking against stone. My vision went white, then black, then red. Sound faded to a high-pitched ringing. Through the haze, I saw the flag still waving. Saw Sasha's face above me, mouth moving, saying something I couldn't hear. Saw Leonov slumped against the rubble, clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. The sky above was gray and orange and filled with smoke that looked like souls leaving the city. Everything hurt, everything. But we'd done it. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me. I woke to ringing ears and gray air. The world came back in pieces. First, the pain, a dull, throbbing ache in my leg that sharpened to agony when I tried to move. Then sound, muffled, distant, like hearing underwater. Voices, explosions, the crackle of fire. Then memory, the flag, the roof, the fall. I opened my eyes. The sky above was lighter now, smoke thinning enough to show hints of actual sky beyond. Dawn? Midday? I couldn't tell. Time had become meaningless, just another casualty of the battle. I tried to sit up. Pain exploded through my leg, white-hot and immediate. I gasped, fell back, pressed my hand against the wound. My fingers came away red and sticky. Easy, don't move. I turned my head. Sasha sat beside me, back against a piece of rubble, rifle across his lap. His face was pale beneath the soot, eyes red-rimmed and distant. Blood had dried on his temple from a cut I didn't remember him getting. How long? My voice came out as a croak. 20 minutes, maybe more. He gestured vaguely at my leg. Tied it off best I could. You're bleeding, but not bad. You'll live. Will I? The question felt absurd, even thinking it. I'd survived. Against all odds, against all logic, I'd survived. But looking at Sasha's hollow eyes, I wondered if surviving was the same as living. Leonov? I asked. Sasha's expression darkened. He nodded toward a shape lying a few meters away, covered with someone's coat. Still. Too still. No, I whispered. Shrapnel. Same blast that got you. Sasha's voice cracked. He held on long enough to see the flag go up. Then he just stopped. I stared at the covered form of our commander, the man who'd pulled me from the crater, who'd kept us moving when every instinct screamed to stop, who'd driven the flagpole into the rubble with his last strength. Gone. Just another name that would be forgotten by everyone, except the people who knew him. Another sacrifice on the altar of victory. I forced myself to sit up, ignoring the pain screaming through my leg. From this angle, I could see more of the roof. Bodies scattered across the broken stone, Soviet and German lying together in death's democracy. Weapons abandoned. Helmets rolled against debris. And rising above it all, torn and burned but still standing, the flag. The red cloth snapped in the wind, defiant against the gray sky. Someone had reinforced it since the blast, wedged more stones around the pole. It wasn't coming down. We'd won. The thought felt hollow. I dragged myself toward the edge of the roof, Sasha helping when my leg threatened to give out entirely. From here, I could see the plaza below, the approach we'd charged across. The marble steps were carpeted with bodies. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. A river of red flowing down white stone. Soviet soldiers mostly, but Germans too, all of them still now, all of them equal. Tanks burned like candles across the plaza. The T-34 that had provided covering fire was a blackened shell. Turret blown completely off. Debris littered every surface, rifles, helmets, backpacks, all the equipment of war rendered meaningless by death. "We did it," Sasha said quietly beside me. "We actually did it." "Yeah," I said. "We did." But I couldn't feel triumph, couldn't feel pride, just a vast, yawning emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. I reached into my pocket with trembling fingers, pulled out the photograph. Katya and Anya, frozen in that moment before the war stole everything. The photo was torn now, stained with blood and ash, Katya's face partially obscured. But Anya's smile was still visible, still real, still worth everything. "You can live now," I whispered to them, though they couldn't hear, though they were hundreds of kilometers away in a world that felt like it belonged to someone else. "You're free. Free from Hitler's tyranny, free from the threat of invasion, free to grow up in a world without swastikas and death camps and the systematic machinery of genocide." We'd given them that, at the cost of Yuri, of Leonov, of the boy in the courtyard and the thousands of other boys who'd never go home. Was it worth it? The question felt obscene. Of course it was worth it. We'd ended the Reich, torn down the symbol of Nazi power. We were heroes, weren't we? I looked at the flag again, really looked at it. That red cloth represented everything we'd fought for. The motherland, freedom, justice, the end of tyranny. But it also represented Sasha pulling the trigger on a 14-year-old boy. Yuri burning alive in a steel coffin. Leonov bleeding out on this roof while I lay unconscious. Victory and trauma, inseparable. "Do you think it changes anything?" Sasha asked suddenly. "All of this. Do you think the world will be different now?" I wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that this war had taught humanity something, that we'd collectively learned from the horror and would never let it happen again. But I'd seen too much. Known too much. The truth was darker and more complicated. "Maybe," I said finally. "For a while, until people forget. Until the dead become statistics and the stories become legends and nobody remembers what it actually felt like to stand in the ashes." Sasha nodded slowly. "My grandfather fought in the Great War. He told me once that they called it the war to end all wars. 25 years later, here we are." "Here we are," I echoed. Below us, Soviet soldiers moved through the Reichstag, securing rooms, checking for holdouts. Some raised their weapons in triumph. Others just sat down and stared at nothing. Victory looked different on every face. A medic finally reached the roof, climbing through the hatch with a bag of supplies. He saw my leg and hurried over, started working on it with efficient, practiced movements. I barely felt it. The physical pain was nothing compared to the weight settling in my chest. "You did good," the medic said as he wrapped fresh bandages. "Both of you. Heroes of the Soviet Union." Heroes. The word tasted like ash. I'd come to Berlin believing I was fighting for something pure. For justice, for freedom, for a better world. And maybe I was. Maybe we all were. But I'd learned something on this roof. Something I'd carry for the rest of my life. War doesn't make heroes. It makes survivors. And survival isn't victory. It's just another form of loss. The flag waved above us, symbol of everything we'd won and everything we'd paid. I wanted to feel proud. wanted to feel accomplished. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of death. Tired of violence. Tired of pretending that necessary and right were the same thing. The medic helped me to my feet. Foot, really, since I couldn't put weight on the wounded leg. Sasha moved to my other side, supporting me. Together, we limped toward the hatch, toward the stairs that would take us down and out of this place. Behind us, the flag kept waving. Ahead of us, Berlin burned. And inside me, something fundamental had shifted. The boy who'd climbed into a T-34 3 years ago was gone, replaced by something harder, colder, more aware of what humans could do to each other when they believed they were right. We descended into the Reichstag's dark interior, leaving the light and the flag behind. "Dmitri," Sasha said as we reached the 4th floor landing. "What do you said back there about people forgetting?" "Yeah? We won't forget, will we? We'll remember. For them." I looked at him. This man who'd shared my hell, who'd killed to save me, who'd smiled through the apocalypse until he couldn't anymore. "Yeah," I said. "We'll remember." It was the only promise I could make. The only thing that gave any of this meaning. We'd remember. Even when the world moved on. Even when the stories became propaganda and the deaths became numbers in history books. We'd remember what it cost. We'd remember what we lost. We'd remember that peace wasn't given. It was bought with blood and paid for with souls. The stairs stretched down into darkness, and we descended together. Survivors of a battle that was over, but would never really end. Above us, through holes in the ceiling, I could still see the flag. Waving, always waving, a symbol of victory that looked like a funeral shroud. Morning light spread through the broken city. I walked through the ruins alone, leg wrapped in bandages that were already seeping red. Rifle slung over my shoulder more from habit than necessity. The battle was over. The guns had fallen silent. Berlin lay beneath a pall of smoke that rose straight up into a windless sky, like the city itself was exhaling its last breath. The streets were different in the silence, louder somehow. Without the artillery and gunfire to drown them out, I could hear everything. The crackle of dying fires, the groan of buildings settling into their wounds, the drip of water from broken pipes. And underneath it all, a silence so profound, it felt like pressure against my eardrums. The silence of the dead. They were everywhere. Lying in doorways, slumped against walls, scattered across intersections where they'd fallen. Soviet soldiers and German soldiers and civilians who'd been caught between. Some looked peaceful, like they were sleeping. Others didn't. I'd learned to walk without looking too closely at faces. I passed a burned-out tank, not ours, not the T-34 that had been our home and fortress and tomb. This one was a Panzer IV, turret blown off, interior gutted by fire. A German helmet sat on top of it, placed there by someone. Memorial or marker, I couldn't tell. The Spree River reflected the gray sky, its surface dotted with debris. A child's toy boat floated past, somehow intact, sailing through the wreckage toward some destination it would never reach. I watched it disappear around a bend, feeling like I should remember something important about innocence and survival. But the thought slipped away before I could grasp it. A German woman stepped out of a doorway ahead. She froze when she saw me, arms instinctively wrapping around the bundle she carried. A baby, I realized, wrapped in blankets that had once been white. We looked at each other across 10 meters of rubble-strewn street. She was thin, hollow-eyed, face streaked with ash. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, like she'd watched her world end and was still trying to understand how to exist in whatever came after. I knew the look. I'd seen it in mirrors. She waited for me to do something, shoot, shout, arrest her. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held the baby closer, preparing for violence because violence was all we'd known. I nodded. Just a slight dip of my head. Acknowledgement. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, just recognition. One survivor to another. She nodded back. Then she turned and disappeared into the ruins, carrying her child toward whatever future waited in the ashes. I kept walking, past shattered statues that had once proclaimed German greatness, past propaganda posters torn and burned, Hitler's face melted by fire, past a piano sitting in the middle of the street, blown out of some upper-floor apartment, keys exposed to the sky. I pressed one as I walked by. The note was flat, discordant, wrong. It felt appropriate. The Reichstag appeared ahead through the thinning smoke. In daylight, it looked smaller than it had during the battle, less monumental. Just another building, damaged and scarred like everything else. The dome was pockmarked with shell holes, windows blown out, facade cracked and crumbling. But the flag still flew. Even from here I could see it, that splash of red against gray stone and grayer sky. It moved in a breeze I couldn't feel at ground level, rippling like something alive. Soviet soldiers moved around the building's base, setting up positions, organizing the aftermath. Some were laughing, celebrating. Others sat silent, staring at nothing. Victory wore different faces. I found Sasha sitting on a chunk of fallen masonry near the plaza's edge, smoking a cigarette he must have found somewhere. He looked up as I approached, offered the cigarette without speaking. I took it, drew deep, felt the smoke burn my lungs in a way that was almost comforting. At least this pain was simple. "They're saying Hitler's dead," Sasha said after a long silence. "Shot himself in his bunker, or poison. Stories keep changing. Does it matter? I guess not." He took the cigarette back, stared at its glowing tip. Dead is dead. We sat in silence for a while, watching soldiers move through the ruins. A truck rumbled past, filled with wounded. Someone was singing somewhere, voice cracked and off-key, some song about the motherland and glory. "What do we do now?" Sasha asked quietly. It was the question, wasn't it? The war was over, or would be soon, once the last holdouts surrendered or died. What did soldiers do when the fighting stopped? When the purpose that had defined every moment for years suddenly evaporated? "We go home," I said. "See our families. Try to remember who we were before all this. And if we can't remember?" I didn't have an answer. Couldn't promise that home would fix what war had broken. Couldn't promise that Katya would recognize the man who came back. Couldn't promise that Anya would understand why her father's eyes went distant when he heard loud noises. "Then we try anyway," I said finally. "Because the alternative is staying here. In this." Sasha nodded slowly, took a final drag from the cigarette and crushed it under his boot. "You saved my life, you know, on those steps, when you pushed me out of the way of that. You saved mine first, in the courtyard and on the roof. We're even. Are we?" He looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. The same weight I carried. I killed a boy, Dmitri, a child, and I know it was necessary. I know he would have killed us, but I know. How do you live with that? How do you go home and hold your daughter and pretend you're not someone who? "I don't know," I interrupted, more sharply than I intended. Then, softer, I don't know, Sasha. Maybe we don't pretend. Maybe we just carry it and try to make sure it meant something. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, did it mean something? I looked at the Reichstag, at the flag flying above it, at the destroyed city spreading in every direction, at the cost written in blood and bodies and broken souls. Yes, I said, and meant it despite everything. Hitler's regime is ended. The camps will be liberated. The killing will stop. Our families will live in a world without Nazi terror. That means something. But it doesn't erase what we did to get here. Both are true. It mattered, and it broke us. We can't have one without the other. Sasha absorbed this, nodded slowly. I can live with that, I think. We stood together, two survivors in a field of ghosts, and started walking. Away from the Reichstag, away from the battlefield, toward whatever came next. Behind us, the flag continued to wave. At the river's edge, I stopped one final time, looked back at the city we'd taken. Berlin lay broken and burning, an empire's corpse cooling in the spring air. Somewhere in those ruins, mothers were looking for sons, children were looking for parents, everyone was looking for something that had been lost. I thought about Yuri, about Leonov, about the boy in the courtyard, about all the names I'd never learned and faces I'd never forget. We came here to end an empire, I whispered to the smoke-filled air. But I think it ended us too. The Reichstag stood against the gray sky, flag flying, victory proclaimed. But I knew the truth that no flag could change. We'd won the war, but we'd all lost something that could never be recovered. Some piece of ourselves left behind in the mud and blood and fire. Some innocence or faith or simple belief that the world made sense. Sasha touched my shoulder. Come on, let's find some food. Try to remember what peace tastes like. I nodded, turned away from the Reichstag one final time. The river flowed past, carrying debris toward the sea. The city burned. The flag waved. And somewhere, far beyond the smoke and ruins, Katya was waiting. Anya was growing up. Life was continuing, indifferent to the horrors we'd witnessed and the prices we'd paid. We'd given them peace, and peace had cost us everything. I took one step, then another, walking away from the battlefield toward an uncertain future. The war was over. The dying was done. But the remembering, that would last forever. The empire died with a whisper, and we too were ghosts in its last breath.